forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March.
Again, rebounded by Indiana. The game is over.
For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk,
Oh, he just shook the gravity.
and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Dace.
Greetings. Welcome to another week here on Bigger Ten. I am Steve Dace. He is my co-host, never partner, Aaron McIntyre. Good to see you proudly brandishing the colors after a big win for your Hawkeyes last week.
They have been sparing this year, so I had to bust out the colors, in one occasion when I actually could feel good about it.
I don't blame you. I lived through the Rich Rod years, man. You learn to cherish things. I hear you. I feel you. All right, so a ton to get to. There's not any controversy or anything brewing around the Big Ten this week, right?
Oh, heck no.
Nothing. It's kind of going to be a very mediocre, fair to Midland episode. But
Yeah.
let's begin our Big Five talking about actual football, shall we? All the ingredients were there for an upset. Ohio State actually trailed early in the fourth quarter at Penn State. Penn State has had a knack. They don't beat Ohio State very often. Heck, they don't beat a lot of good teams very often, actually. But they do have a knack for playing Ohio State very tough. And lo and behold, they had the Buckeyes in the crosshairs. They outgained Ohio State. They out-first downed Ohio State. That's really hard to do, by the way. Nevertheless, the Buckeyes found an extra gear, got maybe the defensive player performance of the season in college football, and a game that was a lot closer than the final score. The Buckeyes, though, they took a punch, Aaron, and punched back hard and walked out of Happy Valley with a win and what's probably their only real road test this entire season.
Yep, and, we talked about with Jim Knowles coming to the Buckeyes, it might be a little difficult filling in early, but as long as they were good in the trenches or better in the trenches, that would allow the rest of the defense time to catch up, and I think they've caught up right now. Now, I don't know how much a lot of people are talking about after the Iowa game. How much stock do you put in that defense's performance because Iowa's offense is so bad? I think, and not much, but now after that performance against Penn State, because, they were out first down, but the defense, I believe, is how they were sparked to just pouring it on really there in the fourth quarter. So I'd be, first and foremost, if I'm thinking postseason, if I'm an Ohio State fan, I'm thinking, well, you know what? We've got a defense that's actually going to kind of, at the very least, keep us around, give our offense a little bit more margin for error. That's the biggest takeaway for me. And then, of course, I texted a buddy during the game. C.J. Stroud, he's great, but I'm not sure he's first-round draft pick great. But then, he does Ohio State quarterback things. He just does. And the good thing about Ohio State is because of the tools he has around him, don't really need to be anything above and beyond that to have a really successful team.
Speaking of those tools, I don't know that any player has helped themselves more, with the possible exception of Hendon Hooker, has helped themselves more for the upcoming draft than Marvin Harrison Jr. has.
I know.
He had a breakout game in the Rose Bowl, but remember, he barely saw the field in meaningful action last year. Even this year, he was considered second, third option on this team. The loss of Jackson Smith and Jigba with his hammy issues, I would not be shocked if Marvin Harrison Jr. was the first wide receiver taken in the NFL draft this year. The explosiveness, the precision of route running, I don't know, it's a little bit like Marvin Harrison Sr., actually.
It's funny you bring that up. There's a picture going around. I don't know what kind of, I think it was a watch he was wearing, like a really blinged out watch on the field. And my wife and I were watching that. That was earlier in the season. And she was like, wow, his dad must be rich. And I'm like, well, let me tell you who Marvin Harrison Sr. is. But yeah, if as good, if not better, especially in this day and age in this era of football in general. He might have a chance to be more talented. I don't know about the numbers at the next level, but he certainly has a chance to at least be in the same echelon as his dad.
All right, let's get to what is the other issue and really the big issue in Big Ten athletics right now. So first, there was a game. All right, Jim Harbaugh did actually beat Mel Tucker for the first time. Wolverines were really in control of this game, except for one drive when Michigan State got away with a couple of hero ball plays. but they were nearly doubled in yardage. They just weren't a threat much at all. I think they had -3 yards coming out of the halftime. Mel Tucker was telling the ABC News crew, they can't cover our wide receivers. They had 2 catches total in the second half. I mean, Michigan was never in any danger and then does kind of what they do, not get touchdowns in the red zone, make Jake Moody an All-American kicker, right? You've heard me say that basically, Kinnick is Iowa is a less talented version of Michigan. Michigan is a more talented version of Iowa in many respects.
Dude, I mean, watching Michigan, especially that game, it's like I've seen this before. This is Iowa, Wisconsin. This is what Wisconsin has done to Iowa. It's just put you in a chokehold and just keep, for 60 minutes, not all at once, 60 minutes just keeps, tightening that grasp. Python.
I don't know how many coaches could have a 5-star quarterback and not be tempted to let him chuck it 30 times just because. But Michigan, by golly, they're pretty disciplined. They're going to make them throw the ball. They're not going to do it because you're going to have to make them. Otherwise, they're content just to hand it off all game long and like you said, put you in the chokehold. But it's what came afterwards that became the story. I talked about this quite a bit on Michigan podcast yesterday. That was the 600th game played at Michigan Stadium. That is the first one that has ever had a criminal assault take place in the tunnel afterwards. Numerous camera views have come out, including one from ESPN. Each one looks worse for Michigan State. They've now suspended a total of 8 players, including one of their best players, Jacoby Windman, who is seen putting his helmet on to join the melee. We see another player, Kerry Crump, throwing his helmet around, which is a severe penalty in the NFL for doing it on the field in a game. I mean, that could be a lethal weapon if that had gone poorly. There have been numerous apologies from Michigan State's athletic director, university president, Mel Tucker, earlier this week. There's a ongoing criminal probe going on right now in Washtenaw County. Last night on College Football Live, former Michigan great Desmond Howard just absolutely came off the steel cage, Jimmy Superfly Snuka style, on Michigan State's director of football operations. He showed him coming out of the tunnel with the team going into the game and telling the camera guys, get out of bleeping way, and playing the tough guy act. And then he also showed in the tunnel view when the melee began, that exact same guy doesn't step in to stop it. He takes off running to get out of the way. Just a complete failure of leadership across the board. I've never seen anything like it in all my years watching college football. That's kind of the particulars. Both Michigan players that were involved, Jade McBurrows and Jamon Green, may be out this week. Jamon Green's one of Michigan's best defensive players. He's in the concussion protocol right now for getting hit with the helmet. So I had a lot to say about this and analyze yesterday on Michigan Podcast here on the channel. Those are the latest facts as we've known them. Brett McMurphy at the Action Network pointed out 8 Sparties suspended, 7 Michigan State points. That's a tweet. But your thoughts on this, Aaron?
So I have a little bit different take on this than you do, and Lord knows this topic, maybe more than any other this year, has invited a lot of bungholes, a lot of opinions. Everybody's got one about this topic, and my take with this is this could actually be this whole situation. This situation could actually be a very healthy thing. If and only if, and I will tell you what the if and only if is a little bit later. First of all, I'm going to repeat something 3 times so that everybody within the sound of my voice can hopefully remember this. And my take on this somehow is simultaneously should be the least likely to inflame emotions no matter what your opinion is of this matter, and simultaneously will probably get everyone pissed off at me that hears this. I prefer the latter, because if it's the latter, it's, at least to me, I think that's probably means I'm correct and I'm right with my take. So I'm going to repeat this 3 times. The players involved with this should be charged with assault. The guy swinging his helmet should be charged with attempted murder. The guys involved with this should be charged with assault. The guy swinging his helmet should be charged with attempted murder. The guys involved with this should be charged with assault. The guy swinging his helmet should be charged with attempted murder. None of them should play another snap of football. With that being said, I think the difference of opinion here with this, Steve, kind of boils down to whether or not you believe anything was said. And it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because of what I'll explain that in a little bit. But if something was said, then you would have a little better understanding. And you said, I think yesterday on Michigan Podcast, the angle that ESPN showed of the tunnel proves that the guy that was getting beat with this helmet, at least, didn't do anything to instigate.
Yeah, I don't know about McBurrows. We've not seen that angle. But
no,
okay.
I disagree with that. I mean, that's a wide angle. Unless you have a 4K, 8K, 32K high definition view of that, that's a wide angle shot of something that happened 20, 25 feet away. I watched it multiple times thinking I missed something. And, it certainly doesn't look like it, but you can't see with any detail. So I disagree with that premise right away. So I am working under the assumption that in maybe both of these situations, something was said. We don't have anything prior to the original video that came out. We don't have anything before that actually happened. We just see the Michigan State guys wailing on the Michigan player. And so I'm working under the assumption that something was said or some things were said. Now, if it comes out and there's evidence beyond a shadow of a doubt that nothing was said and this just happened, then I'm happy to change my thoughts on this. And when I first started hearing takes on this, it just reeked of fan-based, just fanaticism, basically, on both sides. No matter what you think of this, because it would be the most Michigan thing ever to just assume that your guys are sources of light and that they tiptoe on raindrops. We're the leaders and best, victors and valiant. And we're so far above the riffraff of the great unwashed. That would be the most Michigan stereotype thing ever. It would also be the most Sparty stereotype ever to just jump a guy for no reason and try to literally kill him. That would be the most Sparty stereotype ever. I told you I was going to get everybody. See you Michigan fans, see you Michigan State fans. So I just don't think you can honestly say for sure that nothing was said. With that being said, trash talking. Is trash talking in and of itself bad? No. Should young men be taught or feel like they can say any degree of trash talking anytime, anywhere? No. If you are trash talked to, should you feel the obligation or the right to respond? Yes. Should that response ever involve trying to bash a player's head in? No. If somebody from a different country comes to our country and they commit some heinous act, do we have a right to respond to that country? Yes. Would it be a commiserate response to nuke their biggest city? Probably not. Maybe it depends on what that person did here. In Iowa, here where the show originates, I think it was earlier this year, maybe it was back in 2021, we had a high school basketball player going through the handshake line, absolutely cold-cocked after the game, absolutely cold-cocked, I think injured a player from the other team. And word was that this guy was just giving him all sorts of smack talk throughout the game. And so he took out his frustrations on him. He's now a criminal. I'm fine. I'm fine that he wanted to take out his frustrations. Just know that there's a consequence for the way that you did it. I think this can be an incredibly healthy situation if and only if these players are punished appropriately. Because, Steve, in the state of our culture right now, would it surprise you to learn that young men do not know when to shut it off, do not know when to shut their mouth, no matter if they're wearing the Block M or the Spartan green and white? Would it surprise you to learn that they may not know when to shut it off?
No, I mean, I'm shocked at the stuff my kids and their friends will say to each other on text chains and those sorts of things. And it's the kind of thing that would have required you to get an orthodontist appointment when I was growing up if you said those things to somebody's face.
Would it shock you to learn that the young men of this day and age don't know what an appropriate response is and would take it too far?
No, I mean, that's the other thing too. We've no bullying. So now you just get bullies and there's no law of the jungle to mitigate against that. So, yeah.
So I think this entire fiasco could be very healthy. Because if you were one to talk smack, and I'm serious here, this is going to maybe be what turns on the most people. If you're talking smack, you got to have it in the back of your head. hey, if I take this too far, it could end my life. It could end in my life. I'm surrounded by a bunch of guys who are stronger, faster, or just as strong or faster. If I take this too far in the wrong situation, it could end my life. And then on the other end, if I take my response to this too far, I'll be in prison. I don't know. To me, consequences always seem like a pretty healthy thing, one way or the other.
I don't necessarily disagree with that. Tell me why you thought I might disagree with it.
I just think I pointed out the one thing we disagree with was just just proclaiming that we know that there was nothing said.
I don't know what happened with Jaden McBurrows. For people that don't know, Jamon Green is apparently the first person up the tunnel every week. His twin brother also plays on the team. They're from Texas. Their dad's a trucker, takes time off of work he doesn't have to drive up to the games on Saturdays. And so he's the first person up the tunnel, doesn't celebrate a lot with the team afterwards. So he can be showered and stuff when the team comes in and Harbaugh speaks to the team so that he can get out of there and miss the throng and everything else to see his family. I mean, he's one of Michigan's best players. He's never talks to the media afterwards. Yeah. So there's a backstory there with him.
He might be a great guy. I don't know. And I'll take your word for that. To me, what he was back there for and what any of them were back there for is a non sequitur in terms of whether or not there was something said. It's great that he got to see his dad. That doesn't tell me anything about whether or not he was talking smack. It certainly seems like it wasn't, but
I think, and I even said yesterday. I mean, if he had said, "Hey, look at the revenge porn of your sister I'm sharing." Hey,
unless there's
are there things that worthy of you getting curb stomped like that? You could say. I actually would say,
I have a bomb.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I would say the answer is yes. But you have to think, don't you think? It's Wednesday at the time you and I are taping this. If there was any mitigating information whatsoever to try to excuse this, don't you think we would have heard it by now?
I don't know.
Okay.
I really don't know.
Like if they showed pictures, they did deep fakes of their mom turning tricks in hell. Don't you think they would have said, hey, they did do that, So I think we probably would have heard about it on Wednesday by now.
Yeah, I don't know about that, and I don't know if it can be. I don't even know if there could be mitigating information. I mean, tell me what that would be. The players were all swarming around. They don't have cell phones on them, so I don't know how that would have been necessarily captured. All we have is just the incident in one circumstance, the incident actually taking place, nothing that transpired before there. And then the other one that we actually do have some video of what transpired before, it's inconclusive in my mind. So I'm not sure that we'll really get the truth.
Inconclusive in terms of whether something was said to instigate them is what you're saying. Okay. So the thing I go back to is everybody wants to link this with the Penn State thing 2 weeks ago. That was the throwing of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches at halftime. If you actually watched the tunnel video after the game, I have, because a bunch of us were watching it after the game to see if something was going to happen. You know what you saw after the game? A bunch of guys walking up, talking to each other in different uniforms, slapping five, even hugging each other, and then a bunch of guys who were pissed off that just said nothing to nobody and went into the losing locker room, like the previous 599 games that have been played afterwards at Michigan Stadium. I mean, I just can't think of anything like this that has ever happened anywhere in America. Can you? I mean, think of the nastiest rivalries out there: Alabama, Auburn, Miami, Florida State in its heyday. I mean, Miami didn't do stuff like this when it was the U. I've never seen anything like this.
Who was it? Who was the Ohio State coach that cold-cocked the Clemson player? Was that Woody Hayes?
78, the Gator Bowl, Woody Hayes. Yeah. But that sort of stuff, all those examples, there was a big fight, I think it was Mississippi State, Tulsa in a bowl game.
Oh, yeah.
All that stuff has always happened on the field. Like, I can't think of a time in the history of college football where a curb stomp, like you're driving down the street on 8 Mile, it's a scene out of Boys in the Hood, and a curb stomp, or a scene out of, A Country Boy Can Survive, and there's a friggin' curb stomp happening in the tunnel. Yeah. I've never heard of that.
How many stadiums? This would happen a lot more often if every stadium just had one tunnel.
But there's a lot more stadiums that have, both pro and college, have one tunnel than people think. This is not just a Michigan Stadium thing. Notre Dame Stadium has just one tunnel, for example. There's a lot of stadiums that have just one tunnel. That is not as much of a unicorn, I think, as a lot of people suspect that it is, particularly the more venerable stadiums that have been around for a while. but I've just never heard of that. It's never happened before. That was the 600th game we played at Michigan Stadium. There's been a lot of nastiness. There's been a lot of rivalries. There's been a lot of trash talk. I mean, Woody Hayes once led the Ohio State team out of that tunnel to jump up and collapse the MGO Blue banner that Michigan touches and trash it on the field before a game. All right? I've just never heard of that going into the outside of the white lines.
Right. And it's not like, I mean, wasn't it? It was last year. It was the Michigan-Ohio State game last year. I mean, Michigan, the entire team was trying, ostensibly, I mean, they were yelling at Ohio State, just a few feet of the entire Ohio State team in the tunnel right in front of them. So this is not, it's not like there's not a history of Michigan trying to, rile themselves up or rile the other team up. That's not resulted in Ohio State players, taking their helmet off and bashing them in, but it's not like this type of thing hasn't happened in terms of, altercations in the tunnel.
That's the thing. You keep talking about confrontations in the tunnel. And yeah, those aren't unique. I mean, there was a famous confrontation in the singular tunnel between Notre Dame and Miami in 1988 where the security had to come in and separate the two teams before it maybe got to this point. And maybe if things like Michigan State's football ops director had stepped in and stopped it, some of these guys that you're talking about wouldn't be getting criminally charged at this moment.
There was Michigan staff that were running away from
that I do agree with. I did see that. I mean, there's adults everywhere that could have stepped in, and then there's
teammates too that. I mean, at least I saw one guy basically put one Michigan State player put his teammate in a headlock.
Yeah,
to lead him away.
I think that was Xavier Henderson, who I did see was the one Michigan State player that was trying to. I think that was who that was. Who was trying to stop this from going any further. But the 88 episode between the Catholics versus Convicts game and the Notre Dame team goes into the locker room afterwards, and they're convinced that Lou Holtz is going to lose it on them for losing their composure. And he walks in there and he says, "Man, I got just one thing to say after all that BS. Leave Jimmy Johnson to me." All right, and then led the team out on the tunnel. Okay, but
yeah, you're talking about 600 games, and I'm talking about how many of those games were played with a different era of young man too. My basic point is that this type of thing was bound to happen in this type of era.
Now that I think is an excellent is a good point to ponder, which is another reason why you need more adult leadership, and another reason why there has to be draconian consequences to this so that a precedent is set that it just cannot possibly ever occur again. I mean, when Ron Artest did Malice at the Palace, dude had to change his name. I mean, he literally had to reboot his identity. There was such an example set after that moment, back in the day. Something like that needs to occur here. That this sanctity can't ever be violated ever again, no matter what. Period. You can't do that ever again. Agree or disagree? Well, I think you kind of said that already too.
No,
right?
Yeah, no. It's only a healthy thing if there are consequences. It's healthy if they were talking smack. It's healthy for the people who like to talk smack because then they have them back of their head. Hey, the guy that I'm talking smack to might be an effing psychopath. And the guy who wants to get back at somebody for talking smack to him, saying, I better not take this too far because I may never play a snap of football again and I could be behind bars for what I do. I think that's a healthy thing.
This was an interesting last weekend. The malice at the big house aside. You want to talk about bucking some history in the Big Ten here this last weekend. Take a look at this. 4,025 days is how long it had been since Illinois had gone on the road as a ranked team. 4,025 days. That's more than a decade. It had been 2,919 days since Iowa beat Northwestern at home. That blew me away. 2,198 days since Penn State has beaten Ohio State. That streak is ongoing. 1,078 days since Michigan had beaten Michigan State. So 3 out of those 4 droughts were snapped, Aaron.
Yep, I couldn't. When I saw this, I couldn't believe the Northwestern stat against my my Hawkeyes at home. It's just been. I mean, they've had our number, but now, I mean, what has happened to Northwestern? They don't have a win in over a year
they have
on
not
American
won
soil.
on this continent.
Yeah. And then
Think
Illinois.
about that. Their only win was in Ireland.
Illinois, Illinois. I thought they looked kind of shaky in the first half, but they looked like they just showed up and won, basically. And I think that's a really good sign for them.
That's a bad sign for everybody else.
Yeah. And then
if Illinois is just showing up and winning games now.
Michigan and Michigan State, we already kind of talked about that boa constrictor type of win for Michigan, and that's kind of been their style this year, at least in Big Ten play.
Let's talk about the first college football playoff rankings of the year that were unveiled on Tuesday night. Tennessee is number 1, but I'm fine with that looking at the resume of what they've done, but I actually want to take you to number 24. If you want to know why we need college football playoff expansion and why we don't actually, as I have said for years, we don't have a playoff. We have an invitational. All right, let's look at team number 10 and team number 24. All right. So LSU, who lost to unranked Florida State to open the year and got absolutely obliterated by Tennessee at home just a few weeks ago, has played really one really good half of football against Ole Miss in the second half and one good game against unranked Mississippi State. And somehow that has them as a 2-loss team, the number 10 team in the country. And then Texas with 3 losses. And their only really good win was against an Oklahoma team that is unranked, is number 24. They're the only 3-loss team ranked. Why am I focusing on these 2 teams? They're not in the same league. They don't play each other. But Aaron, they have a common opponent. Do you know who that is? Alabama, as Keith Jackson used to say. Yeah. See, what this committee does, it is not a playoff. There's no way to play your way in. It is an invitational. You can see that a narrative is being created here. And that the narrative is to get Alabama where you want them ahead of undefeated TCU, who just all it did was beat a ranked team every month and every week in the month of October. That's all TCU did. Beat a ranked team every weekend, the entire month. But to create the narrative that it wants, to boost Alabama's resume, you have Texas, you put them as a 3-loss team in, and now Alabama, because if Texas isn't ranked...
multiple top 25 CFP wins.
If Texas isn't ranked, Alabama can't claim it's beat any ranked teams.
Yep.
And then you make LSU number 10. What's the network that does all the college football playoff games?
ESPN.
What's their primetime game this week, Aaron?
That would be that game.
LSU and Alabama. Yeah. See, and by the way, what network what's their conference allegiance?
ESPN.
Yeah. There is no justification for LSU being the number 10 team in the country. I'm not sure what justification exists for Texas being rated at all.
What show are we doing? Are we doing the one that we did earlier in the day today? Because I feel like it's the same show, just in a different context.
But this is the crafting of a narrative.
Yes.
And this is being done with the expressed intent of later on ranking Alabama where they want to rank them. And that's why you need college football playoff expansion, so that there is, with some form of auto bid, that you can at least do something. If I win my league and we're one of the highest rated conference champions, we get in. So that I did something during the regular season other than be called Alabama to earn a position in the field. This is pure invitational Banana Republic stuff that I'm talking about here. Am I wrong?
No, it's so frustrating to watch. On the same token, though, if Alabama wins the rest of their games convincingly, they should be in.
Yeah, they'll be SEC champs. 1 loss, they'll be in.
But in order to rank them, in order to put them let's pretend what would be a good ranking for Alabama off the top of your head right now?
I would have them actually 7th.
Yeah,
below TCU.
So 7th ranked team. Is it easier to sneak into the top 4 if you're ranked 6th or ranked 7th?
Much easier on that first page than the second one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's one tiny example, but I cannot stand this either. And then when the playoff does expand, who's going to be doing the ranking show, who's going to be involved with that, who's going to be the title sponsor, TV sponsor.
First 2 years, it'll be ESPN.
Yeah. So
and then it'll open up after
for
that.
the
probably.
at-large bids as well. We're going to be playing the same game, just maybe with LSU one year or Auburn the next year, assuming or Alabama as well, depending on who's ahead of them, if anybody is. We're going to be playing this same game again with the at-large bids. At least then, like you said, though, at least then, if you win your league, you get in. That's the biggest part of this.
Which brings us to, now that we're into November, how about some bowl projections? Based on how I am forecasting the season to end right now, these would be the projections I have for the Big Ten in the postseason. Ohio State to the college football playoff, Michigan to the Rose Bowl. Now, when I did these other bowl games, I also factored in, recency. A lot of these games after those first two don't want to have repeat teams, okay? So Citrus Bowl, Penn State, the Relia Quest, which is the old Outback Bowl, that is now Illinois. Duke's Mayo, Purdue, Music City, Maryland, Pinstripe, Minnesota, Guaranteed Rate out in Arizona, Wisconsin, and the Quick Lane, Iowa. Although I could see those two reverse. Both those fan bases travel very well. It's just, I don't think the Guaranteed Rate Bowl has ever been able to have Wisconsin out there, so I went with the Badgers. But those are my bowl projections as of now. Your thoughts?
First of all, ReliaQuest. I mean, we've had these ridiculous names before. ReliaQuest just sounds...
You missed the Pull and Weed Eater Independence Bowl?
I mean, yeah. Outback Bowl was an institution. It had been around for a long time. At least that sponsor had been around for a long time. So it just sounds like something out of Idiocracy. I mean, like, it's the Brondo Bowl. Illinois got electrolytes.
Got my degree from ReliaQuest.
Yeah. I think these are all pretty accurate. I mean, if you're Illinois, though, and you win the West and you do so in pretty convincing fashion, that's that's not as big of an if as it was even this time last week. Congratulations, you're going to the ReliaQuest Bowl. That's kind of disappointing, but that just looks like the way it's going to shake out, barring a Penn State.
That's a great game for Illinois, man, and a lot of exposure. But I hear you.
Yeah, but ReliaQuest. It's ReliaQuest. I mean... It's the ReliaQuest.
It doesn't roll off the tongue, I will admit.
No, unless there's a big fall from grace from Penn State, the final stretch of the season here. That's probably where it's going to shake out. Duke's Mayo, Purdue.
Because they were in the Music City last year, right?
Yeah. So who's the conference foe for Duke's Mayo off the top?
So going down this,
ACC?
so the Rose, Michigan in this instance would play the Pac-12 champion.
Yeah.
The Penn State would play an SEC team. Illinois would play an SEC team.
Oh, okay.
Purdue would play an SEC or an ACC team.
ACC, yeah.
Maryland would play an SEC team. Minnesota an ACC team. And then Wisconsin, I think, is a Pac-12 team. And then Iowa would play a MAC team.
I'd be fine with that. I don't think they're going to get to a bowl game, but I'd be fine with that. But I can see this generally shaking out the way that the way that you have it lined up here.
All right, we'll come back, play our weekly game of Would You Rather here in a moment. All right, let's play our weekly game of Would You Rather here on Bigger 10. Aaron, as always, I begin with you. Would you rather with the Hawkeyes out of the division race, would you rather start Spencer Petras the rest of the season or try and develop Alex Padilla for next year's starting quarterback?
I think at this point, just let Spencer Petras start the rest of the season. He's going to be gone after this year anyway. Padilla, I don't think the starting quarterback for Iowa is on the roster.
Okay, and that's why you think that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I at this point, just let it play out with Spencer Petras. I mean,
so we're saying that you still think he gives you the best chance to win, basically, after seeing what Padilla brings to the table.
I'm saying I don't care. I don't care. Think about how high of a character of an individual you have to be to keep on trotting out there. So just for that alone, just let him do it if he wants to.
Okay.
So.
All right.
I think they're going to hit the transfer portal for a quarterback. I mean, Kirk Ferentz, even yesterday at a presser, as we're taking this on Wednesday, this is on Tuesday, said something to the effect of, with the era of college football you're in and player movement, you would be a fool or something like that not to take that into account. And
then why didn't you do it last year?
Because he was a fool back then, I guess.
Okay. Or this year, I mean.
Yeah. This one is for you. Would you rather bet Nebraska money line or Michigan State money line this week?
No, Nebraska easily. They're at least at home.
Yeah.
And, without Casey Thompson, who's not a very smart quarterback, by the way, but he's also the only quarterback they had that gives him a chance to win a game. I don't even know if he's going to play with that hand injury. I wouldn't want any part of Michigan State's team this week. I can't even imagine. First of all, their season is forget the assault. Their season is over. All right, they're out of the division race. The Michigan game was kind of their last chance to sort of reboot and redefine things. They shot their wad. They would have already suffered what we call in handicapping the dream crusher loss anyway. Okay, now you throw in everything that's gone on there. I mean, what in the world has game week prep been like at Michigan State this week? I mean, I wouldn't want any part of Michigan State at all. Yeah, I mean, ring the bell. I mean, I wouldn't at all. I mean, I wouldn't bet against him either. Like some of you are thinking, wow, I'm going to look at the spread and see what Illinois is favored by. I could see Michigan State, on the other hand, deciding, F the world and pulls off a huge upset, because it's not like Illinois has got a great talent disparity against Michigan State. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But I would not put any money on Michigan State with where they're at right now mentally at all. None.
All right.
For you, with the Nittany Lions out of the division race, see what I'm doing here? Okay.
Yep.
Would you rather start Sean Clifford the rest of the season or try and develop 5-star recruit Drew Aller for next season? I went on the record on our Twitter account after the game was over against Ohio State. I mean, your next 4 games, Penn State's double-digit favorites in every one of those games. Is there a big difference between finishing 9-3 and 10-2?
No.
I don't think so. You're going to bring back a lot of this team next year. Why saddle them with an inexperienced quarterback? Get the 5-star ready. Sean Clifford's had 6 years, couldn't get it done. I'd move on, but that's my position. What do you think?
And it wouldn't be a tough sell with the fans either. So
No.
I would do the stone cold thing here. Not that Clifford's a terrible quarterback,
No.
but I would do the stone cold thing here. We were planning on next year being our year anyway. Let's get some more snaps in for Aller. And we've already seen him play, and he looked pretty good. It's not like he's going to be, look like a certain Senate candidate out in that part of the world either on the field. So, I'd say go with him. Your fans aren't going to hate you, and you really got to prepare for next year anyway. Finally, or this one is for you. Would you rather bet Ohio State on an alternate total against Northwestern of -49? Or Michigan's, an alternate spread, I should say, of -49, or Michigan's real spread of -26 versus Rutgers this weekend?
I think I'd rather bet Ohio State -49 because I know what they're going to try to do. Some of the same things that I just said about Michigan State are kind of true about Michigan. What's their game week prep been like, right? Now, the difference is they're a hell of a lot better team than Michigan State. And they're going into a game where I don't know how many guys that are going to start for Rutgers. And they're obviously very improved under Greg Schiano. I don't know how many of their guys would start for us, though. So there is a massive talent disparity between us and them. I also think Greg Schiano thinks probably he found a formula last year. Remember, his was really until Georgia with all those NFL players. That was really the one defense last year on our entire schedule that slowed our running game down. We barely ran for 100 yards against them. So I could see him stacking the box, and then I could see J.J. McCarthy maybe hitting a few good plays, but struggling early, and maybe Michigan wins like 31-10 like the Indiana game. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I could see a game script like that. But I think there are, if I'm going to bet an alternate line, then I think I'd rather bet it on the team that I know for sure what their game script looks like, as opposed to the other team that maybe has multiple game scripts with where they're at right now.
Makes sense.
All right, we'll come back. Twitter poll results and our feedback of the week next. This week's Twitter poll results, we asked you, will Illinois go on to win the Big Ten West? Remember, they still have to play at Purdue. And if Purdue were to win the game, then Purdue would control its own destiny. But that did not deter 87% of you do believe that the Illini are going to go from not making a bowl game last year to winning the Big Ten West, and I don't blame you at all. They are just a solid-looking football team. Another great job by Brett Bielema. Brings us to our feedback of the week. Zachary Thies The first 50 minutes of the game against Penn State represented Ryan Day's worst game he's called at Ohio State. Some inexplicable running and screenplay calls. You don't attempt run-pass balance for the sake of balance. You attempt balance if it makes you more likely to win the game. It took him 9 drives to realize that. Now, I put this in, Aaron, because I want to get your take on what I was discussing with Mark Rogers, who's a Bucknut, on the Michigan podcast here on the channel yesterday. Just as Michigan fans are like, don't you think we might need more of a downfield passing game to beat Ohio State? I think Ohio State fans like, why are we running the ball with all these receivers?
Yeah.
And I think Ryan Day is like, it snows in Columbus at the end of November too. And maybe we need an alternative game script here to beat Michigan. They're not going to just roll over for us, the first time you punch them in the mouth like they used to do. And we might have to win a game against them the way they want to play. And I want to show our players that they are prepared to play that way. That's my theory. You think there's anything to that?
I think that's a possibility, if for no other reason. I mean, has Ryan Day in previous seasons shown an aversion to passing the ball 40 or 50 times?
No, he's been criticized for throwing it too much.
Yeah, so what's different this year? Well, you lost to Michigan in the snow last year, so that could be a factor.
Something to think about moving forward. All right, that'll do it for this week's episode. We are back again next week. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, share, follow, 5-star review, whichever applies, however you watch, like right here on YouTube, or listen, like on iTunes and elsewhere. Help us to find more Big Ten fans just like you. You can also follow us in between episodes at Bigger10 on Twitter, at Bigger10 on Twitter as well. For Aaron McIntyre, I'm Steve Deace. We'll see you next time right here on Bigger 10.